if you are a professional wrestling fan, then I'm sure you're more than likely to be aware of Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette is a man with approximately 40 years of experience, worked for pretty much every single major professional wrestling company in the United States of America. Is one of the guys, to be honest, not afraid to voice his opinions on professional wrestling and any other matter, and has been involved, well, you could say, in a few controversies over the years. The latest being regarding selling of t-shirts. Now this story is a little bit convoluted. There's a little bit of a long story before I give my opinion on this, but I just want to recap the story for anyone who's not aware. Like I said, Jim is a very well known professional wrestling personality. He's, some people like him, some people don't, but as I said, you can't deny his experience and knowledge. Jim also has 2 weekly podcasts. On Mondays there is Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru, and on Fridays the Jim Cornette Experience. With Jim being known really for airing his opinions and easily airing his opinions on the podcast or on social media, it's on there on social media where fans will tend to send him links or video clips to wrestlers doing things that are dangerous and or stupid during their matches, which sometimes leads to them being talked about on either of those podcasts. And one such video clip that he was sent involved a wrestler called Brandon Graver. Brandon Graver's clip involved him, and he was badly injured during this clip, being slammed onto a load of light tubes. Brandon Graver is one of those so-called deathmatch wrestlers. I don't like that kind of stuff personally, and I have to agree with the kind of general opinion. I can't remember it word for word, but Jim Cornette basically said that yes, this is dangerous and or stupid. He kind of gave that sentiment, at least from what I remember, that yeah, this was another thing that was dangerous and or stupid. Like I said, many of the other clips that he gets sent on a regular basis. Now, Brandon Graver took exception to Jim's comments, had an artist draw up a design, and then he placed that design on and started selling t-shirts. I believe it was only t-shirts. I don't believe he put it on any other type of merchandise, but certainly put the design on t-shirts and started selling them. Part of the thing about Brandon Graver was, like I said, he was quite badly injured during what happened on that clip when he was slammed into the load of light tubes. Like I said, I don't really agree with deathmatch wrestling. Hardcore has its position, which is another video for another time, perhaps, but many of these deathmatch wrestlers, they use all sorts of garbage and everything every single match. And I don't agree with it personally, but Brandon took that design, put on t-shirts, started selling it, and eventually, and I'm not entirely sure whether it was people on social media tagging Jim Cornette or whether it was people making him, phoning him or texting him or whatever, but eventually Jim Cornette became aware that Brandon was selling t-shirts with this design on it, and I'm going to put up the design, but I've edited it a little bit for the sake of YouTube, because I don't want things against my channel, but that was the design that he started selling. And in fact, this past week on the Jim Cornette Experience podcast, which you can hear on all well-known podcast platforms, plus there is also the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, which contains clips and sometimes full shows of Jim Cornette and his co-host, the great Brian Last. You can check that out, but this past Friday they uploaded an episode of the Experience where Jim talked through having been made aware of this design being sold by Brandon Graver. he talks about the situation with his, which is an ongoing situation with his attorney, Mr. Stephen P. New, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette. And they talk about it on this week's episode, which has kind of led me to do this video. And they talk about Jim being made aware of it, and Mr. New giving Brandon the chance to stop those. How Jim believes that the design is infringing on his image and his copyrights, his trademarks, kind of. Again, they all discussed that on the podcast, and how they are suing Brandon to stop him selling this design. Now, one of the interesting things about this whole situation of Jim suing Brandon Graver was that actually it turns out, according to Jim and according to Mr. Stephen P. New, again, Jim's attorney who is handling this matter, and is an attorney, to be honest, I don't know him personally, but all I've heard about people saying about him on social media and the reputation that he seems to have built. He deals with major cases for major companies, or against major companies, and literally talking about millions of dollars worth of cases. So he seemed to be a very competent, very competent attorney. What Jim and Mr. Stephen P. New said on this week's podcast was that apparently and allegedly Brandon didn't pay that original artist, and Jim has now paid that artist and has a legal release from that artist. So Jim is now selling that t-shirt legally, although it's still, even looking up myself yesterday, it's still available on a few different sites, not legally allowed or contracted by Jim. Jim now has a legal release from that artist, whose name I don't know. I do not know whether that artist's name is out there, otherwise I would credit that particular artist. I don't know whether it's male or female, or whatever, but that artist has now been paid, allegedly, according to Jim and Stephen P. New, by them, at least by Jim, and they now have a release, as I said, for Jim to sell that design on t-shirts on jimcornette.com, which I believe the website looks for Jim Cornette on Twitter. I'm sure you'll be able to find links to store there, but I'm sure it's something like jimcornette.com. Jim sells a wide range of merchandise, from burger towels to restraining orders that was taken out against him by Vince Russo. All sorts of different merchandise you can search on his website and buy items if you want to. But Jim has now got that release to legally sell that design on a t-shirt on his website. One of the things also that's happened, apparently, and I didn't know it until this past week's Jim Cornette Experience episode, was that Brandon, apparently in retaliation, I suppose you could call it, against being sued and being told to stop selling t-shirts with that particular design on them, he apparently made a Clownette t-shirt. And I'm not going to give links to where this t-shirt is available. Again, jimcornette.com for the official licensed Jim Cornette merchandise. He literally handles all that himself. It's him and his wife who take in the orders, package the orders, ship the orders. They do everything, all on jimcornette.com. Just want to make it very perfectly clear. But Brandon made a Clownette t-shirt, which he claims is not an image of Jim Cornette. It's just simply a sad clown. Now here's kind of where it gets to my opinion, because this case is ongoing. It's not settled yet, although to be honest, I expect it to be settled in Jim's favour. I am no legal expert, and I'll get to the kind of legality of this in a minute, a couple of minutes. First of all, I'm not a graphic expert like apparently Stephen P. New has engaged to look at these designs, and it's a graphic design, and Stephen P. New's also had his friend who is a trademark or copyright expert. I believe they own some kind of agency together as well. But Stephen P. News has had someone look at the designs, the Cornette one and the original design, and they've looked at it whether and to kind of give their official and legal opinion on whether this infringes on legal issues such as the image or an image of Jim Cornette being used. Now, will say I am not a legal expert. I'm not never undergone any type of legal training whatsoever, and I'm certainly no graphic design expert either. I've never been able to draw. I could draw stick figures and maybe a couple of little bits, but I'm really not good at drawing. But even as a layperson, as just an average Joe, just looking at these designs, in my own opinion, an opinion of nobody else, I would say certainly that these are absolutely images of Jim Cornette. The first design is obvious. It's an obvious take and use of Jim Cornette's image. It's clearly Jim's face on that first design, without a doubt. It says "Screw Jim Cornette." I've edited it for YouTube, and certainly the second one, even the second one where it's the sad Cornette one, yeah, that's Jim Cornette as well. I've got to say that is Jim Cornette. They've tried. I don't know who the second, whether there's been a second artist involved in that, because I said that the first artist was supposedly allegedly not paid by Brandon Graver. So whether he's done it himself or whether he's got some other artist to do it somehow, I don't know. And I'm sure that Jim Cornette and Stephen P. New, his attorney, will be looking into that issue. Both images, even as a layperson, I would say is clearly Jim Cornette. My opinion on this is that, yeah, I think that said Jim Cornette has a case. I think he has grounds to sue. I do think that he has grounds enough, I think, to win the case. Again, not a legal expert, but using someone else's image, particularly in the United States, I'm not sure again about laws, but I'm certainly aware that certainly there's been many rights issues in terms of sporting stars, footballers, baseballers, and a few others, where, especially in professional wrestling, use of their image, so it's facsimiles or using their image, has been the case of many court claims and lawsuits over the years. I believe it's a lot tighter in the United States because there are many different deals that have had to be done in regards, and this has become a thing over the last 20 years about use of image of a player for promotional things like video games, posters, any kind of merchandise, whatever. Certainly, it's Jim's image. It's clearly Jim's image. To try and keep it simple, it's Jim's image. It's Jim's face on both these designs. If you were to put them in front of wrestling fans or any person, put these two printed T-shirts of each of these designs, one Cornette and one of the original Screw Jim Cornette T-shirts in front of someone, and put a picture, and even say, right, do you know who this is? And that person says no. If you were to put a photograph of Jim Cornette down in front of that person, in between the two T-shirts, and ask them, do you think that person in the photograph is the person on these two T-shirts? Look at the photograph, look at the T-shirts, is that the person you would think? I would be pretty sure that majority of people, maybe 7, 8 out of 10 people would say yes, that person in the photograph is the person whose image is on the T-shirts. Again, it's pretty clear to me that it is Jim Cornette on these T-shirts. And to be honest, I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to wrap up in a minute, but it's pretty much the same as a hobbyist photographer. If someone was to take my images, my photos, or, to be honest, I think it's very easy. What I would say is, people in this kind of situation, is put yourself in the shoes of that other person. Does it feel right? And I know some people don't have the morals to do so, or have enough morals to do so, but how would you feel if someone used your photograph, your image, work that you had done, whether it be a photograph, a painting, a graphic design, whatever it was, even music, a book, or whatever it is, they'd taken that and they started copying it and selling it without giving you a single penny. If someone else started doing that to you, you wouldn't be happy that is going on. And that is kind of where I think people mostly, the majority of the time, should place themselves. So, right, well, is it fair that I copy this and, is it fair and morally right that I copy this and start selling it and make money of it and not give the author, and most, obviously, there's a lot of things about trademarks and copyrights these days, not give them a single penny. Most of the time, majority of the time, it's not right. It shouldn't be done. And that's basically what, in my opinion, my own opinion, that's what's going on here. So I think Jim has the right to sue. He's sued at quite a high level. He's calling it a federal lawsuit, which I don't know the American justice system, but federal is obviously quite a high up. There's state and then there's federal in terms of, and then I think there's some Supreme Courts. But I think, that's pretty high level. I would imagine Jim will win this lawsuit. We'll have to see in a few weeks whenever this gets to court, or whatever the reaction from Brandon Graber is in regards to whether he whether he stops selling these these designs or not, or whether Jim actually has to take him to court. Certainly I'll be tuning in, as I do every week, to the Jim Cornette podcast, whether it be the Jim Cornette whether it be Jim Cornette's drive-through and the Jim Cornette experience, to hear what the latest update in this in a few weeks. I'm sure Jim and Stephen P. New will keep us up to date on that. And to be honest, I would very much like, if it's possible, I don't know about, again, legalities and everything like that, I don't know whether it'd be possible. I'm sure it would be, because they've been discussing it on this week's, as I said, Jim Cornette Experience podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts and on the official YouTube, official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. I would love Stephen P. New to come back onto the Jim Cornette Experience podcast and talk about the whole situation from beginning to end, once it's settled, and about how he's handled the matter, what he normally would do in this situation, because certainly Jim is suing. I think Brandon Graber, he hasn't really got a leg to stand on.